superstar is about to sign a Nike endorsement deal worth $28 million.
It pisses me off when people are like, she's not the face of the league.
Who would be?
What?
Nike wanted to give Caitlyn Clark $25 million. She had not even finished her first WNBA season yet. The contract was ready. The lawyers were present. The executives had their pens out. Everything was set. The plan was simple. Sign the deal, smile for the cameras, hold up the jersey, say a few nice words, and then go home. But Caitlyn did not follow that plan. In a room full of media people, Nike executives, and her own teammates, she did something that no one expected. She turned to face Sophie Cunningham. The room went completely silent because of what she said next. There were no cheers, no clapping, and no flashbulbs going off. It was not just a business announcement that night. It was not just a sneaker reveal. It was a statement. By the end of the evening, it had completely changed the conversation around women's basketball in America. So sit back, because this is the story of a rookie who used $25 million of her own leverage to do something that has never been done in professional sports. It will take a few minutes to tell, but every part of it is worth hearing. Now, before we get to what happened at the Nike event, we have to talk about something that most casual basketball fans do not fully understand. The financial situation of the WNBA was almost a national embarrassment for many years. I am not making this up or being dramatic. I am telling you the truth. In this league, veteran players, women who had given 10, 12, or 15 years of their lives to professional basketball, were often paid salaries that were not enough to cover their rent in the cities where they played. For many years, the average salary was in the mid-five-figure range. A top player could only make about $250,000 from her actual basketball contract. For most people, that sounds like a lot, and it is. But when you compare it to the NBA, where the minimum rookie contract is over $1 million a year, you start to understand the gap. During the off-season, these women had to take second jobs, actual real jobs. Some worked as high school coaches, some gave private training sessions. Angel Reese, one of the league's most popular young players, said publicly that her WNBA paycheck was not enough to pay her rent. Think about that for a moment. A professional athlete at the highest level in her sport in America could not pay her rent with her basketball salary. So what did these women do? They got on planes. They flew to Europe, Australia, Russia, China, and Turkey. They played in other leagues during the WNBA offseason just to make enough money to keep their basketball careers going. They often spent months away from their families and homes. Endorsement deals were rare back in America. Sneaker contracts were almost non-existent. Think about that. The biggest names in women's professional basketball were wearing shoes made for someone else, with someone else's name on them, while the companies that sold those shoes made huge profits. For years, only a few WNBA players ever had their own signature sneaker. Cheryl Swoops got one in 1995. Then came Maya Moore, Candace Parker, and Elena Delle Donne. Sabrina Ionescu got hers in 2023. That was pretty much the whole list. A league that started in 1997 had almost no women with their own shoe. That was the reality. That was the financial state of women's professional basketball in America. Then, in the spring of 2024, Caitlyn Clark entered that world as a rookie. And she pretty much broke everything immediately. The numbers varied at first, with some reports saying 28 million over 8 years, but the most common number was closer to 25 million. This was not just a record for a WNBA sneaker deal. It shattered the previous one completely. To put it in perspective, Sabrina Ionescu's multi-year deal with Nike was the largest in WNBA history before this, and it was in the seven-figure range. Caitlyn's deal was not just bigger, it was massively bigger. We are talking about a number that made veteran NBA players stop and question how a rookie in the WNBA could earn that much in endorsement money so quickly. In one moment, Caitlyn went from being a college star to the most marketable rookie in women's basketball history. She was no longer just the face of the Indiana Fever. She was the face of the commercial future of the entire league. In many ways, she was the face of women's sports across America, and the size of that deal was not because Nike was just being kind. They were not being generous out of the goodness of their hearts. It was cold, hard business logic. They did not sign her just because she could shoot from 35 feet. They did not sign her just because she had broken every scoring record in college history. They signed her because every arena she walked into sold out weeks in advance. They signed her because television ratings doubled or even tripled when her name was on the schedule. They signed her because her jerseys were selling out so fast that the league could not keep them in stock. And most importantly, they signed her because she brought in a whole new generation of fans. Many of those fans were young women and girls who had never watched a WNBA game before. The 2024 WNBA draft, where Caitlyn was picked first by the Indiana Fever, was watched by 2.45 million people. The previous record was about 600,000. Before she had even played a single professional minute, she more than doubled the draft audience. That is why the number made sense. That is why the deal was historic. Nike was not just betting on a player. They were betting on a movement. They were betting that this woman would break through a ceiling in sports marketing. And as we know now, they were completely right. For most athletes, that would be the peak. That is the top of the mountain. You sign on the dotted line. You do the press tour. You let Nike build a whole marketing campaign around your face. You ride that wave as long as you can. And nobody would have blamed Caitlyn for doing exactly that. She would not have been criticized. No one would have expected more from a player who was still technically a rookie, still learning the league, and still taking physical punishment every night. But Caitlyn Clark is not like most athletes. She never has been. And the reason we are telling this story now is because of what she did next. She did not just cash in and move on. She took the biggest financial opportunity of her career and gave some of it to someone else. Not metaphorically, not with a nice speech and a pat on the back. She did it with a real contract, a real pair of custom shoes, and a real plan. Nobody in that meeting, not the executives, not the journalists, and not even her teammates, saw this coming until it was happening right in front of them. The Nike event was supposed to be a standard affair. First, you have to understand that there was a printed guest list and a timeline. There were talking points printed on cards backstage. There were pre-planned camera angles. Nike had even made a special ceremonial jersey with gold stitching just for this moment. It was a tight, simple plan. Step 1, play a highlight video showing Caitlyn's journey from Iowa to the WNBA. Step 2, bring her on stage and give her the jersey. Step 3, let her say a few polished lines to the audience. Step 4, take 1,000 photos. Step 5, send everyone home happy. The content would go on every social media platform. The internet would buzz for 2 days. Pre-orders would come in. The machine would keep running. This was standard operating procedure for a big Nike launch. They had done it 100 times before. That was the blueprint. Caitlyn walked into the venue with her usual energy. She was calm, focused, and completely in the moment. She never seemed overwhelmed by the lights or the cameras. If you have ever seen her before a game, you know that presence. Even at 22, she carries herself like someone who has been doing this for 20 years. Sophie Cunningham was standing next to her. Sophie thought she was just there for support. Maybe she would appear in a few background photos. Maybe Caitlyn would thank her briefly during the speech. Maybe she would get some sparkling water and a snack. She had no idea what was about to happen. Nobody in that room did. The lights went down. The noise faded to a low hum, and then there was complete silence. A short film began playing on the big screen behind the stage. It followed Caitlyn's entire journey. It started in high school in Des Moines, Iowa, where she was already drawing crowds that most college programs could not fill. The video showed her as a young kid making long three-pointers in half-empty gyms, while local cameramen tried to follow her every move. It moved through her legendary college career at Iowa, where she rewrote the scoring records and became the most exciting player in women's college basketball history. Then the film shifted to her first WNBA season, and it did not hide anything. It showed the hard fouls, the cheap shots, and the hits that referees somehow did not call. It showed the sports commentators who said she was overhyped. It showed the internet trolls who attacked her just for being in the spotlight. The video showed the exhaustion, the late-night flights between cities, and the weight of carrying an entire league's viewership on her shoulders. But the film also showed the other side, the crowd roaring at buzzer beaters, the sold-out arenas with lines around the block in cities that had never sold out a WNBA game before, the young girls in her jersey watching her like she was a superhero. The film showed the moment the whole league quietly realized that Caitlyn Clark was not a trend. She was not a flavor of the month. She was a permanent change in women's basketball. The film ended and the screen went dark. A Nike executive came on stage with that gold-stitched jersey in hand. The audience leaned forward. Phones came out. Everyone had been waiting for this moment. This was the photo opportunity. The plan was for Caitlyn to take the jersey, hold it up with both hands, smile at the lights, and let the flashbulbs go off. She took the jersey. She held it. She looked at it for a second longer than anyone expected. Then she turned away from both the executive and the photographers. She turned to face Sophie Cunningham. Her voice was steady, but every word carried weight. And she said something that was not in the script. She said, "This is not just for me. This is for all the women who show up, fight hard, and defend their team." There was no applause. There was no cheering. The room froze because nobody knew what was happening. And Caitlyn Clark was far from done. From behind the curtain, a sleek black display case rolled onto the stage. The audience still struggled to understand. Caitlyn pulled out a custom shoebox. She did not pose for photos. She did not hold it up. She walked it straight to Sophie Cunningham and placed it in her hands. Sophie smiled. She probably thought it was a gift, a nice keepsake. Maybe team-colored sneakers to remember her teammate's big night. That alone would have been a lovely gesture. Sophie opened the box. Inside were a pair of specially designed, player-only sneakers in full Indiana Fever colors. They had a phrase stitched on them that had defined Sophie's whole playing career. It said, "Never give up." Sophie looked at them. She touched the stitching with her fingers. Then she saw something more underneath the tissue paper. A folded contract. Not Caitlyn's contract. Sophie's contract. Caitlyn Clark had negotiated a separate endorsement deal for Sophie Cunningham as part of her own massive Nike contract. She had sat across the table from Nike executives during one of the biggest business negotiations in women's sports history and told them directly that she would not sign her deal until her teammate got one too. Let that sink in. Let it really land. Caitlyn Clark used all of her leverage to pull up another chair in a league where every player is fighting for minutes, attention, and a spot at a table that barely has enough space. She did not just give someone else the spotlight. She physically made the light bigger so a second woman could stand in it beside her. Now you have to understand that this is not how professional athletes operate. I am not saying this to be negative. I am saying it because it is simply the reality of how the business works. In pro sports, leverage is everything. When you have it, you use it for yourself. You use it to maximize your own contract. You use it to get the biggest piece of the pie. That is how the game is played. Agents teach it. Financial advisors recommend it. The whole industry has been built on that for decades. What Caitlyn did went against all of those rules. She broke the unwritten code on purpose. Sophie looked at the contract. Then she looked at Caitlyn. For almost 30 seconds, she stood there in silence, holding the box and the contract, trying to make sense of what had just happened to her life. At that point, the room finally understood. The silence ended. The applause started, but it was not the polite kind you hear at a business event. It was the kind that happens when people realize they have just witnessed something they will tell their grandchildren about. You might be sitting there thinking, okay, that is a beautiful gesture, but why Sophie? Why her out of all of Caitlyn's teammates? If that is your question, then you have not been watching Indiana Fever basketball this season. Because Sophie Cunningham was a huge reason Caitlyn survived her first year. I am not saying that for drama. I am not saying it to build a story. I mean it literally. Without Sophie Cunningham on her team, the physical beating Caitlyn took could have been much worse. From her very first WNBA game, Caitlyn had a billboard-sized target on her back. Not the kind that comes with talent. Not the kind that comes with being picked first. The kind that comes from being too good, too visible, and too popular for a league that was simply not ready for the change she brought. She was hit harder than anyone else on the floor. She was constantly pushed, grabbed, and elbowed. Screens were set against her with extra force and extra intent. The contact happened more often, higher, and later than the rulebook should have allowed. The referees ignored a lot of it for reasons that people still argue about online. Sophie stepped in at that point. She was not looking for endorsement deals. She was not trying to get more camera time. She was doing the unglamorous, uncelebrated work that never appears on the stat sheet. She threw her body into hard fouls. She sent a message to the rest of the league that cheap shots on her teammates would have consequences. Any player who took a swing at Caitlyn, whether with words or actions, had to deal with Sophie head-on. She was the guardian, the enforcer, the unwritten insurance policy that made opponents think twice about running Caitlyn off a screen with bad intentions. Every time a blatant foul went uncalled and the referees swallowed their whistles, Sophie was there to make sure it did not happen again. When tempers flared and fights broke out, Sophie put herself between Caitlyn and whatever was coming. Late in the season, Sophie committed a hard foul of her own while protecting Caitlyn from what looked like an intentional plan by the other team. She did not apologize afterward. She said she would do it again. Everyone watching knew she meant it. None of this was done for attention. She did not do it for personal recognition or sponsorship chances. She did it because she has always been a fierce competitor and that type of teammate, going back to her college days at Missouri and her time with the Phoenix Mercury. And Caitlyn saw all of it. Every single time, she paid attention, but she did not talk about it much in public during the season because that is not really her style. She was keeping track of everything and planning in the background. That is what makes this moment so special. It was not a random act of kindness. It was not a publicity stunt planned in a meeting room. It was Caitlyn looking at the teammate who had taken hits for her and endured punishment on nights when the whole league seemed to want to break her. She was saying clearly, I see you. I will make sure everyone on the planet knows what you have done for me. When Caitlyn said, Sophie makes the plays that nobody sees, she was speaking the honest truth. You cannot create that kind of loyalty in a marketing meeting. You cannot fake it. You cannot script it. It either exists or it does not. Now, this is where the story grows beyond just one night and one pair of sneakers. In the days that followed, Nike had a choice. Option 1, they could treat the Sophie moment as a nice story. Let the social media buzz go for 2 days and move on to the next campaign, sticking to the original plan of releasing Caitlyn's shoes by themselves. Option 2, they could fully embrace what had just happened and reframe their entire campaign around the partnership instead of just the individual. Nike saw the bigger picture. Women's sports had been exploding. The 2023 NCAA championship game between Iowa and LSU had drawn nearly 10 million viewers, the most in American history. Caitlyn was responsible for half of those viewers. Season ticket sales for the Indiana Fever went up by over 1,000% after she was drafted. Road games were selling out in cities that had never seen a full arena. To Nike's marketing team, the Sophie moment did not look like just a nice story. It looked like the most authentic brand moment that no advertising budget could ever buy. So Nike turned around. In just a few days, they completely redesigned their campaign plan for Caitlyn Clark. They were no longer offering just one athlete and one signature shoe. They were offering something much harder to find in professional sports. A true story of loyalty, sacrifice, and an unbreakable bond between two teammates who refused to let the media, the league, or the physical punishment tear them apart. Think about how Nike has used athlete stories in the past. The early Michael Jordan campaigns were built on individual dominance. One man against the world making game-winning shots. The Kobe Bryant era was about the killer mentality and the relentless pursuit of individual greatness. Serena Williams' campaigns pushed towards singular greatness against the odds. But this was different. For the first time in its history, Nike was building a major signature campaign around partnership instead of individual stardom. And the reason it worked was because it was not made in a boardroom. It happened naturally on a stage in Indianapolis when a 22-year-old rookie made a choice that no marketing team could have written. The ads practically wrote themselves. Nike made short films using real practice footage and game day moments. They showed Sophie putting herself between Caitlyn and angry fans during warm-ups. They showed the two laughing together on the team bus after tough losses. They showed them staying late after practice to run pick-and-roll plays. The co-branded items sold out within hours of going online. Caitlyn did not just sign a contract that night. She used it to give someone else a seat at the table, and in doing so, she changed the game forever.